Hello and welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. Washington's political footprint in Central Europe is under scrutiny as JD Vance visits Hungary and signals support for Viktor Orbán just days before a pivotal April 12th election. Joining us today on TVP World to unpack the implications is Orsolya Ráczová, analyst at Eurasia Group, specializing in regional politics, democratic trends, and geopolitical risk across Central and Eastern Europe. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me.
All right, so before we kick things off, we do have some statement made by Vice President JD Vance on his visit to Hungary. Let's take a look, and I would like to get your opinion on it. Let's go.
What has happened in this country, what has happened in the midst of this election campaign is one of the worst examples of foreign election interference that I've ever seen or ever even read about. The bureaucrats in Brussels have tried to destroy the economy of Hungary. They have tried to make Hungary less energy independent. They have tried to drive up costs for Hungarian consumers, and they've done it all because they hate this guy. But I think that what the people of Hungary, what I would encourage them to do is ask themselves the question, not who's pro or anti-Europe, not who's pro or anti the United States of America, but who is pro-you, who is pro the people of Hungary.
Now, these are some pretty scathing critiques of Europe, but at the same time, it does sound a little bit weird calling them out for essentially interfering in an election while kind of campaigning for a specific candidate. What's your take on the message of JD Vance?
Yeah, I agree with you. These were quite powerful words. I expected something along these lines. I mean, we are familiar with Vice President JD Vance's previous statements. I did not expect that he will go this far, of course. It was quite harsh. Also, he didn't specify what exactly mean by interference, because, of course, if we are talking about election interference, we could talk about a number of other countries that the Vice President did not mention. And the EU, specifically Brussels leaders, have been trying to stay away from the Hungarian elections, in my opinion. We have heard very few sentences, very few outspoken support from Brussels bureaucrats in support of the opposition candidate. So I don't see what exactly he means by that. If he is referring to regulation that impact, for example, social media platforms, that's of course a bigger discussion, and there are multiple other factors at play. So in a nutshell, I did expect criticism towards Brussels, probably not in these harsh terms. So curious to hear the EU's reaction to this.
Right, and again, the election is just around the corner. With the election again being this close, is it likely that Vance's appearance or endorsement by figures like Donald Trump actually would influence undecided voters in Hungary?
Yeah, I think that's the key question. Not even the exact statements of JD Vance and the visit itself, but what kind of actual implications it could have on voter choice and voter turnout. I think so last minute at the campaign, it will not have major implications on the outcome specifically. It could move some undecided voters, and maybe a bit more specific, I think it could move some voters who are potentially disappointed Fidesz voters who are thinking of not voting. Some of these voters could be moved, but I don't think that we are talking about substantial numbers that will impact the electoral outcome. I think it is still Peter Magyar who has a better chance to win this election, regardless of JD Vance's visit.
All right, so if that is the case, do you think that this is quite a big political gamble for Vance to put his endorsement behind Viktor Orbán? If he actually loses the election, doesn't that show like a weaker projection of power by the Washington administration, and in turn perhaps make JD Vance look a bit weaker than he is?
Yeah, this is a fair question. I've heard this concern from other people as well, and to some extent, yes. But he is already in a way connected to the Hungarian administration. Both him and Donald Trump have expressed support previously for Viktor Orbán. So we already know that whose side they are on in a way. But I think what the vice president did very cleverly, that he also said that he is ready to work with whoever wins the election. So essentially he said that should Péter Magyar become the next prime minister of Hungary, he is open to dialogue and cooperation. So I think that was actually a clear statement from the vice president as well. So I feel like that he is leaving that door open as well. Also, in a way, he was harsh, but for example, he said that he will not tell Hungarian voters how to vote, neither should Brussels, and he was there careful in wording. We all know, that he is supporting Orbán. That is why he is in Hungary. But I think after this speech that he will be ready to work with Péter Magyar, and I think that he will be open to dialogue with Péter Magyar as well.
All right. With that being said, if we zoom out and take a look at a bigger picture, what do you think Washington's political footprint in Europe, well, not just Central Europe, but the entire of Europe, is going to be going forward? Does this show anything about the strategic approach that the current U.S. administration have for Europe now, being a lot more engaged and with this unusual level of visible support from high-level U.S. figures?
Yeah, we saw that in the latest security doctrine as well, what kind of values the administration supports, and by saying that now they are actively supporting Orbán, the patriots, Christian traditional values, and I think with that they are showing their support for Viktor Orbán. I think that Hungary is still an outlier case in Europe. Hungary has received much more support, or specifically Orbán, than any other European country or candidate from President Trump. And I think part of the reasons is that because Trump was running again, Viktor Orbán was the only one from here who very clearly and openly supported him. We know that the US administration did express support for Polish presidential candidate as well, even at the CPAC there, as well as in Romania. In the Romanian CPAC, there was a higher political visit as opposed to the Hungarian CPAC, where there was basically no high-level representation from the U.S. administration. So through the CPACs, for example, we see that U.S. presence as well. But as I mentioned, there are other forces at play here as well. And when it comes to Russian interference, I think that's a much bigger topic to discuss. But yeah, in a nutshell, I do think Hungary is an outlier, and I don't think that the U.S. administration would go to these lengths for another candidate. With that being said, I was in a way a bit surprised that President Trump did not come to Hungary personally. Of course, we could argue that what if the war in Iran did not happen, would have had the president come here in that case. Of course, he has other priorities now, but he already issued video messages multiple times. And after video messages, some people expected that there will be a high-level state visit, and that didn't happen. So, of course, JD Vance is here now, but of course, having the US president would be a different kind of presence and implication. That being said, I don't think these factors will directly impact the electoral outcome either.
Right. Even though Trump didn't present himself in person, he did make a call while Vance was here, right? And also spoke to the electorate as well. So that does seem to have some effect. Going back to the Trump administration, his approach towards diplomacy is often described as pragmatic, transactional, but at this point in time when it comes to his political endorsement, it does look more like ideological alignment. Do you think that's how the current administration is approaching diplomacy going forward? Is it trying to align with governments that have its conservative value, or do you think there are other more pragmatic or even transactional reasons that the United States are supporting some of these countries?
I would say that it is probably a mix of things. In this case, I think that this is mainly ideological. We know that the values of what the two leaders represent meet and collide in some very specific themes and topics. And Viktor Orbán, as well as President Trump, have re-emphasized these values, which are a very important part of political discussion and campaigning nowadays. And that's patriotism, I would say, the number one, and of course Christian and traditional values. So I do think that here that makes sense. And we know that Viktor Orbán is basically an ally of President Trump when it comes to discussions in the EU as well. President Trump knows where Viktor Orbán stands, so there is some pragmatic element there as well. But for example, when it comes to relations with Russia, that's a much more complicated issue. And that may have impacted this relationship as well. I mean, we heard JD Vance talking about the war in Ukraine a lot, and what was being discussed in Budapest for some time as well was a peace summit, and that came up during JD Vance's visit as well. I think Viktor Orbán was hoping to host this peace summit where President Trump and Putin would have met, and that would have been a big kind of political signal for Budapest's potential power on a world stage, but that never happened. Right. And this was mentioned again. I don't think this would happen. I think that could have had an impact actually on the outcome. That's something where Viktor Orbán could have shown his political strengths to his electorate, maybe through his relationship and connection to President Trump, but it didn't get to that level. So this is what I'm saying, that video messages and a state visit from the vice president where there are no big announcements made, unless there is some unexpected announcement of a mega cooperation that represents really the golden age of these bilateral relationships. Maybe that could have an impact, but I haven't heard anything that yet either.
All right, and of course, the election results remain to be seen. We'll see whether or not this will change the tide in one way or another. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it, and thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thank you.
Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.